Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS, a one stop destination for all the English medium civil services aspirants. The Supreme Court of USA has issued an order striking down the tariff policy of the current administration of USA. Let's understand the order, the background to it, as well as the implications of the order. But before I start, I know a lot of you are preparing for the civil services exams 2027. Right now, all our courses are available at a discounted price of 17,999. Check out the details by clicking on the link provided in the description below. And whatever is the price mentioned in the website, use the code IAS English. You will receive the discounted price and also become eligible for CSE Assure. Now, let me start the discussion. The administration of USA last year on the 2nd April 2025 announced huge rate of tariffs on the trading partners. The government called this as Liberation Day tariffs and targeted multiple trading partners, including India, by the way, and imposed a tariff. Now, in addition to these particular tariffs, over a period of time, 24% additional tariff or penal rate of tariffs were announced on India's exports, taking the total rate of tariffs to 50%. Now, this announcement by the USA administration was done quoting that there is a national emergency in USA. There is a national emergency. The reason behind the announcement of a national emergency is because the tariffs were announced under a law known by IEEPA 1977, International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. So, under this particular law, if there is a national emergency which was told or which was stated by the government of USA, and the USA government stated that this national emergency is on account of the trade that USA is conducting with other countries, and there is a fentanyl crisis which is leading to deaths of multiple citizens of USA. So the trade which is leading to trade deficit of USA and the fentanyl deaths were cited as the reasons to announce national emergency, and the powers under IEEPA were used to impose tariffs on trading partners. Now, multiple companies paid these particular tariffs, right, imported the goods and services, and these particular companies, many of them approached the lower courts first. In fact, there were two rulings of the lower courts, which basically found that the president of USA had not followed the correct procedure. Meaning, under the laws of USA, according to even the constitutional provision, the president of USA doesn't have the power to impose such wider tariffs. The power to impose tariffs, which are nothing but taxes, lies with the Congress in the USA, not with the president of USA. Now, against the rulings of the two lower courts, the government or the administration of USA went to Supreme Court of USA, and the Supreme Court, which has 9 member or nine justices, these particular 9 justices, most of them are conservative in nature, but anyways, in the majority of 6 to 3, basically upheld the argument that the president of USA has gone beyond the powers given to the president under the IEEPA. And the powers regarding the imposition of the tariffs, again, taxes, lies with the Congress, not with the president of USA. This order essentially justifies the argument that the tariff policy can be used basically in case of national emergency as a tool, but cannot be used as a trade policy tool. In emergency, yes, you can use it, but as a trade policy, you cannot use this particular tariff as a tool. Now, this is a very important judgment. What is going to be the implication? Let's understand now. The government of USA has imposed huge amount of tariffs. And before I go forward, do not be under the assumption that with this order, all the tariffs are going to be withdrawn by USA. I'll repeat the statement. Do not be under the assumption that all the tariffs are going to be withdrawn. No. In fact, in addition to the tariffs which have been announced by the US administration using the powers under IEEPA, there are many more other tariffs which are already existing. For example, The steel and aluminum tariffs, which were announced back in the year 2019, these will continue to exist because the powers which have been used are not from the IEEPA but rather another law, which I will give you in some time. Do not worry. Now, the Trump administration has imposed multiple types of tariffs, and the most recent one that is basically announced on the Liberation Day, reciprocal tariffs. These tariffs have been imposed, and according to one estimate, so far $143 billion worth of tariffs or the taxes have been collected under this policy. So now the question arises whether these particular taxes, whether these will be refunded to the ones who have paid the amount. And this is going to be very big issue now. It is going to be very messy issue. In fact, the same opinion has been given by one of the chief justices in the judgment. It is going to be a very messy issue. Reason being, it's not just that the importers have paid these particular taxes, many of the exporters also have paid these particular taxes. But the analysis shows most of these particular taxes have been paid by the importers, which or who then have transferred this in the form of a higher tariff or higher prices, and the customers or the consumers in the USA have borne the burden of these particular higher tariff. So if at all the administration will agree to provide these particular tariffs or the taxes back, there is no clarity regarding what will be the process be followed. And it is not going to be very easy. It is not going to be very soon as well. In fact, the Supreme Court judgment in USA has not basically ruled out this particular fact. They have said, yes, the people who have paid the taxes, the importers who have paid taxes, they can appeal or they can get these particular taxes. But how? There is no clarity. There is no ruling given in that particular context. This is the first very important issue. Second important implication is this is going to further create volatility. It is going to further create instability, uncertainty in the international trade. Reason being, until now, many countries had negotiated a trade agreement, had signed the trade agreement because there was a fear that USA administration would be imposing these amount of tariffs. Now, with the USA Supreme Court blocking these particular reciprocal tariffs, what is the USA administration further going to do? Already they've announced certain measures. I'll explain in a minute. But what is further going to be done by the USA administration? That creates a certain uncertainty in all of this particular situation. And the third very important point to note in this particular context is, if the USA administration agrees to heed to the order, let's assume agrees to heed to the order of the Supreme Court, starts repaying the amount, then the amount which will be repaid is a huge amount that will impose a bigger pressure, financial pressure on the USA administration, which is already having a huge amount of a debt, right? And moreover, the fourth very important point in this context is, what about those particular countries which are negotiating this particular, right, or these which are negotiating trade agreements with USA? Best example, India. India is in the process of negotiating a trade agreement with USA. Now the question arises, what will happen to these negotiations? Although the USA has announced that, the president in the press conference announced that the negotiations will continue, trade agreement, now it is fair, it is right that USA is not going to pay for any tariff, etc. But we will have to wait and see. My gut says that Indian side will basically buy time now. India will take time to understand what is the implication, to understand whether the USA administration is going to follow the order of the USA, right, US Supreme Court, and what other options are available for USA to impose a tariff, because there are some which I will list out in some time. So these are some of the very important outcomes or the implications of the judgment of Supreme Court of USA regarding Trump tariff. Now, like I said, the USA administration has already announced other methods that they will be using to impose tariff. What are these? Listen to me carefully. One law that they've used very recently, the law which has come into the focus now is IEEPA 1977. But is it the only piece of legislation which allows the USA administration to impose a tariff? Absolutely no. The USA Trade Representative, USTR, last night itself has issued, right, a clarification. There was a detailed announcement or a clarification issued. According to this clarification, the USA administration has already announced a temporary 10% surcharge on all articles imported in the USA pursuant to Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974. Now, what are these particular sections? There is one section mentioned, Section 122. There is also one more section mentioned by the USTR, Section 301, right? And there is a Section 232 as well. So please understand, it's not that only under IEEPA that the USA or the administration will be imposing tariff. There are other provisions as well. And that's the reason I said this order of the Supreme Court is not going to reverse all the tariffs of the USA administration. It is going to have an impact on only the reciprocal tariffs which were announced on the 2nd April. That is basically the Liberation Day tariffs that were announced by the administration. But other tariffs which have been announced under other sections, other tariffs which were in place even before the announcement. For example, the tariffs on steel and aluminum, they are going to continue to be implemented. So let me give you the basic idea of these particular tariffs here, or the sections and the importance of the sections. The larger trade can be targeted by the USA administration using these particular sections. Of course, there can be legal questions over these sections usages as well. Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, it empowers the US president to impose additional 15% tariff. But this can be imposed only for a period of up to 150 days. Nothing more than that, only up to 150 days. And there is a reason behind imposition of this. Whenever there is a sudden depreciation of USA dollar, or whenever there is a sudden imbalance in the balance of payment, only in these circumstances can they announce Section 122. There is also Section 338 of the Tariff Act of 1930. And under this, the president is given the authority to impose tariffs up to 50%, 50, right, on those particular countries which are practicing discriminatory trade practices against the USA's exports or USA trade. If the other country is practicing discriminatory policy, that can be targeted, and the president of USA is allowed to impose 50%. But again, these can be questioned legally in the court, right? In addition to this, there are also some other important provisions which can be used by the president of USA administration, but these are specifically applicable to certain products or certain sectors. In fact, the same opinion was given by one of the major, let's say, personality or major, let's say, participant in the current administration, Mr. Besant, who stated that there are other ways for us to impose tariff. And this was way back November 2025. He said there are other ways for us to impose tariffs. It's not that we can use only IEEPA. But the issue is, when we use other sections, it is a time-consuming process. It is a time-consuming process. And this is a national emergency. That's the reason we have used IEEPA. But anyways, Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act of 1962, it allows investigation to be conducted whether the imports are detrimental to the USA's national security. And if it is found, the president will have almost unlimited powers to restrict these particular imports, which has already been used by the president of USA in the context of the 2019 announcement to impose tariff on the steel and aluminum. This is applicable even today as we speak. Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, which gives the president authority to act against unfair or excessive foreign regulations that may burden American trade. They are using these kind of provisions in the context of many countries right now. For example, have a look at the statement issued by the United States Trade Representative. Section 301 investigation is being conducted. Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act is being imposed on many of these particular countries where investigations are being conducted. For example, there are tariffs which have been announced on Chinese exports that has been announced, right, under many of these particular or many of the sections have been used to announce these particular tariff. So with the judgment, it's not that all the tariffs are going to be withdrawn. There are other ways, other means for the USA administration to impose. So this particular, right, let's say friction, trade frictions will continue to happen. But we will have to wait and watch what will be the new strategy of the administration of USA, because they cannot use IEEPA provision now. They have announced a 10% tariff. Now, what will be the, let's say, the strategy followed by USA? What will be the strategy followed by other member countries who have either struck a trade deal with USA or are negotiating a trade deal with USA? Right? In the coming days, there will be a lot of discussion associated with this. And finally, because there is so much of discussion regarding IEEPA, my suggestion, please have a look at the powers, the restriction, what can be done by the President of USA under the IEEPA as well. Now, this particular act, if the President wants to use the act, then first there has to be a declaration of national emergency. There has to be identification of, right, a threat that is causing or that is leading to national emergency in USA. For example, I said the president earlier said there is a threat of fentanyl crisis in India, or there is a fentanyl crisis, and because of the, right, let's say the trade policies used by trading partners, there is an imbalance to trade. USA has been experiencing a trade deficit. In fact, a very interesting point to note here is even after announcement of these particular reciprocal tariffs, yes, it is true, China's exports to USA took a hit, but India's exports to USA have increased in the last 1 year. 1 year I'm talking about. And the trade deficit that USA is so much worried about, the trade deficit has also increased. In fact, if you see the historical, let's say the proof, historical evidence, US has enjoyed a trade surplus only back in the 1970, that too in 1975. Thereafter, annually it has been experiencing a huge amount of trade deficit. And moreover, having a trade deficit necessarily is not a bad thing. But anyways, establish that the threat has a foreign source and the threat can be related to national security, foreign policy, or the economy. These are the precursors where the president is allowed to use the provisions under IEEPA. And once the president uses, what can the president do? Impose sanctions on individuals, companies, or foreign governments. Freeze foreign owned assets in the United States. Block financial transactions. Restrict trade and investment. And finally, prohibit currency transfers. So please be very careful. Although the IEEPA provisions have been used to impose reciprocal tariffs, the powers are not restricted to just the trade. There are many powers which are given to the President of USA under IEEPA. So these are the very important points, the concepts associated with the recent Supreme Court order imposing a ban or imposing a restriction on the presidential powers using the IEEPA provisions to restrict or to impose reciprocal tariff. What are your thoughts regarding this judgment? Do let me know in the comment section. And also, I'm interested to know what do you think should be the government of India's strategy going forward vis-a-vis the trade negotiations with USA. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section of the video. If you have found the discussion interesting, do not forget to hit the like button. If you are yet to join our YouTube channel, kindly do it right now. Thank you. Have a great day.